Alrighty guys, what's up? SparkHabit here, and today I want to go ahead and just give you a few tips and a few tricks and a quick little guide to how to get good and possibly become a demigod in Pixel Gun 3D. I've been playing this game for probably a pretty long time now. Kind of felt like I should probably record a guide on how to get good with Pixel Gun 3D and how to become almost godlike, I would say. I don't really know if I'm actually going to be covering everything you need to know about this game, but hopefully I can actually just cover what else? Hopefully I can cover the main things and the essentials and the essential tips that you can actually that you'll probably need to know about this game. So yeah, without further ado, let us get started. So first things first is you have to. So first things first, you're probably gonna want to go ahead and just get to level 65. Hold on a sec. How do I? Okay, there we go. Yeah, I know that I know that it's probably gonna take you a very long time to at least get to level 65, but trust me, the patience is very much worth it, even if you're a beginner. You know. I know that you know. And I kind of do know it'll probably take a very long time, but for the sake of this video, I mean, there are some things you can actually try to do to level up faster by using these, like using the XP booster. I can't really show what kind of XP boosters you can try using because mine's is still active and it'll pretty much expire in at least 2 minutes. But assuming that, but for the sake of this video, I'm gonna go ahead and just assume that you're actually level 65. So yeah. And then for the armory part, you're gonna have to choose what weapon suits you best. Unfortunately, you cannot really use weapons that you generally like because some of the weapons are pretty weak. Some of the weapons are pretty underrated, and some of the weapons are pretty strong. You either love them, you hate them, or you're kind of neutral with them. You know. And yeah. So yeah, this isn't really my final loadout, but I'm gonna go ahead. But I think I'm gonna go ahead and just give you some tips on what to actually use and what to actually use as a level up weapon. That's not really in the an event weapon or anything. Hopefully I don't get to the event weapons that. I mean, I probably will get to the event weapons, but but you're probably gonna have to bear with me here because I'm gonna go through every single weapon that has helped me and will possibly help you too. So yeah. So the first weapon that you're actually gonna get once you actually start the game is probably machine gun. It's not very good, but it is kind of somewhat helpful. It's kind of basic, but it's still good. Oh yeah, also it's pretty optional, but you can also use a shotgun. I'm not really sure if it's that OP anymore because of modules, which I will get into in a bit. But if you basically want to be like a shotgun person, this is generally a good weapon to start off with, genuinely. And then the next weapon, I recommend getting Casanova. I mean, I prefer Black Mamba, but it's still a really good weapon. It has silent. It actually has a decent DPS, and it actually deals a decent amount of damage. But you can probably get this in a pretty early level, I think, or a pretty reasonable level, you know. And then another weapon that I recommend is getting rapid fire rifle. I'm not really sure if that's actually a level up weapon or an event weapon that you'll actually get out of a chest, but it is pretty good. It has a 99% it has a 99% fire rate, which will always which will always come in handy. And like with the Casanova, it's also silent. What I assume what it means is that is that you can't really hear the shots, or you basically just cannot hear yourself getting hurt by, getting shot by the weapon itself. Coming back to the shotguns part, we also have Predator. I mean, it's a pretty good shotgun weapon, but it doesn't really have a very good fire rate or DPS, I would assume, but it is pretty good. And what's more is that you can also use it for 3-cat spam, which is something that I will not recommend. I mean, you can learn how to 3-cat spam. I mean, massive props to anybody who knows how to 3-cat spam, but for the sake of me, I'm not really gonna go ahead and just recommend it, because I'm not very good with it, and I never even got close to good with 3-cat spamming, So I'm gonna go ahead and just ignore that for now. Maybe 3-cat spamming deserves its own video guide in the future somewhere. Just probably not for me, And then what are some other weapons I would recommend? Oh yeah, you'll probably notice that I actually have a ton of mythical weapons. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and just share some. I don't know. I'm getting kind of lost now. But I'm gonna go ahead and just share some weapons for each category that I probably recommend using, or that will actually help you out a ton. So yeah. Anyways, back to what I was saying. Another weapon that I would really recommend is using Crystal Laser Cannon. It has a very good DPS, well, kind of a somewhat okay DPS, but it also has a fire rate of 100. It shoots very fast. Also minor but pretty important note that 100 fire rate weapons shoots through ammo very fast, so you're probably gonna have to be very considerate of using your ammo. Just don't use up all your ammo, okay? But you're just gonna have to conserve and be cautious about how much ammo you actually use. And then, this one's a good one. I also recommend using Assault Shotgun. Seriously, I was playing as a low level. I've been seeing myself using this shotgun for quite a bit for whenever I want to use a shotgun before I got my hands on one of the good ones, But this one is pretty good, and it's also pretty good for 3-cat, And you can also get it in a reasonable level and for a reasonable price, I think. And then, what else? This one's a good one. This is Secret Forces Rifle. This weapon is literally so good. Yeah, you can see that I actually have a skin of it, but for the sake of this video, I'm gonna go ahead and just show off the original skin. This weapon is really good because because I believe that it actually has a very high DPS, or it probably has the highest DPS out of every weapon. I could be wrong, but let me know in the comment section below. But other than that, this weapon is real good. It's also silent, and it has a pretty good and it has a close to pretty good fire rate. Not to mention that you can also purchase skins of it. I like to use the Neon or the Fishbone skin. They're actually pretty good, and they're pretty well rounded. Another weapon that I recommend getting is Black Mamba. I think this is actually a pretty good weapon because it's also silent. Well, actually, it's not silent, but it does have poison. And it also has a pretty good sound, but sound doesn't really matter to you guys, I don't think. But it's still a pretty good weapon to use. I mean, I think it was. I mean, back in the day, I never even used it, but I heard it's still a pretty good weapon, And then, also, another shotgun is Prehistoric Shotgun. This weapon is somewhat okay. You can see that I pretty much, use modules, which I probably will cover in the video, like I said, I think. But, yeah. Oh yeah, keep in mind that I don't know that much about modules, what kind of modules you should be using, so, you're just probably gonna have to bear with me here. But yeah, the prehistoric shotgun is a pretty good weapon to use. You can also buy it in like the gallery for 500 coupons, which I will get to later. But yeah, it has like a somewhat okay DPS. But all I'm saying is it's basically a shotgun. I think this one also used to have bleeding, or that was the bone sniper rifle. I don't know. It also has like a somewhat okay fire rate, but other than that, there's not really much special to it, but it's still a pretty good weapon that will actually save you a ton. And then we're getting to the mythicals. Some weapons that I really recommend are probably going to be out of the question, whatever that means. But this one is really good. I mean, I pretty much been using this weapon back in the old days, like probably in 2020, in late 2024, and it's still really good. I mean, it's a shotgun, it has critical damage, and it has invisibility after respawning. You can tell how good this weapon is by watching my video that I'll probably link in the description, or probably put up a card saying that of showing you how Three Barrels Cannon is so good. But it's probably a little outdated though, because this weapon probably got a nerf, but it doesn't really matter too much in my opinion. Another weapon that I recommend getting is Secret Access Shotgun. I don't know if I would recommend it because it's pretty hard to get, but it's still a really good weapon to have. I mean, it has bleeding, it has gadget block, and it also has a really good DPS. And then another weapon is Stormbringer. It has critical damage and it also has chain damage, but it is kind of easy to self-damage if you're too close. Like, for example, I'm gonna go to Polygon. I think. Did they nerf this? Yeah, I think they did. Yeah, I think they kind of nerfed it. But I'm sure you actually do get the deal. But otherwise, this weapon is still really good to have. Oh yeah, I don't really have this weapon in particular, but Neutron Pulsator is literally a very good weapon to have, and it's pretty fun to use. But it also has like a 100 fire rate, and it also has a 100 mobility, and it's actually a really fun weapon to use. Now, like I said, with the the 100 fire rate weapons, it shoots through ammo very fast, so you're gonna have to be very considerate and be cautious about how much ammo you actually use. And then for the backup part, I don't know if there's actually much weapons I would actually recommend using. I mean, there are some level up weapons that are pretty good, but I'm not really sure where they are, to be honest with you. So I don't know if this was actually a thing, if this is actually a thing, but I did get these, I mean, I actually got these by watching an ad, but I don't think ads are pretty relevant anymore. But Golden Eagles are pretty good to have. They're kind of like, the Dual Hawks, but they're a little bit better. I think they actually have a pretty better DPS other than the Dual Hawks, which is pretty okay. But the Golden Eagles are kind of a little better, It also has a 4x zoom, and yeah, the only cost is that you would probably have to give permission to be targeted ads and stuff. But other than that, it's still a pretty good weapon to have. Another weapon that I recommend is getting a AI pistol, and because it also has a random effect, it's also a really good weapon to use. I never used it too much, but but the random effect is pretty cool, and it also has a okay fire rate that you can try make use of, And then we also have our first instance of a semi-auto weapon, the Mercenary. Yeah, the Mercenary is actually a really good weapon to use. I mean, it's pretty fun, but it's not as fun as the next weapon that I'm about to share is the Champion Mercenary. It's like the original Mercenary, but it's a little better. It is kind of hard to get. Well, I think it's also in the armory somewhere, but it's still a really good weapon to use because it has burning. Anyways, I'm getting a little too ahead of myself. Dual laser blasters is also there, though it's also I recommend this weapon because it's a 100 fire rate weapon, but I'm pretty sure you already get the deal with 100 fire rates weapon actually shoots through ammo very fast. But it is a pretty good weapon. The only thing holding it back though is that it's really expensive. Like I think you can only buy this for like at least 1,000 coins. But it shouldn't be much of a problem if you do know how to save up. But to save up coins, you have to literally do anything in your willpower to you know, to get more coins. Like literally do anything. Just literally do anything. Just don't do anything illegal or anything. That's literally all I'm gonna say, okay? And then I already shared the dual hawks. They're also an okay weapon to have, but it's just not that crazy, okay? Ooh, this one's a good one. Exterminator. Exterminator is an extremely good weapon. It's kind of like a sniper, but with less damage and with less zoom, but with more fire rate. It also has wall break, and it's actually a really good weapon to have, especially in the past, like back in the good old days in Pixel Gun. But it's still a really good weapon to use. It's also a really good weapon to use, especially if you're 3-cat spamming. Thunderer is kind of like in the same vein, but it also has more DPS, and it's a lot better to use than Exterminator. The only cost of it is, well, actually, and it also has an increased mobility from it, and also not to mention this doesn't really have to do anything with that, but you can also buy some skins to make it even cooler, you know. Another weapon that I would recommend, in the backup section, oh god. This weapon is really good. I really enjoyed using this weapon a lot. I'm not really sure if I would recommend it, but Alien Blaster is really good. It's a single shot ricochet piercing shot weapon. I love it so much. I mean, it's a pretty fun weapon to use. Because I really wanted to buy this weapon, in my old account, but I ended up buying it, and it actually did me a pretty good service, you know. But yeah, overall, this is a pretty good weapon to use. It's just, it's just outshined by a lot of backup weapons. Laser Cycler is a really fun weapon. It's like Alien Blaster, but a little better. In Mythic, because it's mythical, it also and it also slows the target. It also has some skins that I couldn't really quite get to, but it's still a really good weapon to use. But I prefer Alien Blaster more because I think of the skins. But the Laser Cycler is a really good weapon, especially for 3-cat. Another weapon that I would really recommend is the Goose Substance Rifle. I mean, Goose Substance Pistol. I got this for Christmas. I think I got this on on a Christmas chest. I believe, but I'm not really gonna talk about that right now, or at all. But this is a really fun weapon to use. It's not all that, but it's still a really fun semi-auto rocket weapon, and it also target explodes. I'm not really sure what that does, but hold on. Explodes defeated enemy, deals damage to nearby enemies. It's a really good weapon to use, or kind of a fun weapon to use, in my opinion. I had a lot of fun with this. Dual Beam is really good also, because it also has burning, and it also has a really good DPS. And then the final weapon that I would recommend getting is Dual Anger. It's kind of easy to get because you can get it for coupons and for 1,000 coupons. and it also has critical damage and lifesteal. It's really good, and I just wish that I haven't been sleeping on this weapon until like a little later. It's still a really good weapon, you know. Not to mention that it also has skins. And then for the melee, oh yeah, keep in mind that some of these weapons I actually don't. I'm recommending the weapons that I actually do have. Sorry if I couldn't quite get to yours, you know. And then for what else? What are some weapons I can recommend? I'm only gonna cut the melee weapon part short, but Dark Force Saber is a really good weapon. It has a very high mobility because it has a really high mobility, and it also has burning. Like you can actually get it. Like you can actually do some pretty decent damage. But the Elder Force Saber is pretty much like the Dark Force Saber, but a little bit better, you know. And then the Demon Sword, I highly recommend buying this weapon for, I believe, coupons. No, I think you can also get it in the armory for like coins. Sure, it's expensive, and sure, like the attack ratio is like pretty slow, but it's really worth it because it has a pretty good DPS, you know, and it looks pretty cool, you know. And then what else can I say? I kind of recommend Aspen Spear because I don't know why, but it has critical damage. I think this weapon is also good. Ooh, this one's really good. You just kind of I think you can only get it in like certain events, but it's still a really good weapon to have. I mean, it has a bunch of good. It literally has like a bunch of good attributes. And I kind of see myself like, enjoying this weapon for a pretty short time because I don't know. I don't know why, but it's just a pretty good, but it's still a really good weapon to use. Like, it's pretty much the best, according to Pixel Echo. The second light vacuum is also there because it's a dash weapon, and this is pretty much our first instance of like dash weapons. Like you can do some like you can pretty much travel like pretty fast like this. Yeah, it's kind of a broad example of like using dash weapons and stuff. But I never really see myself using this thing a lot compared to like Space Courier, which I recently got. It's a really good weapon. Sure, its DPS isn't very. I don't know if its DPS is actually really good, but it's still a pretty fun weapon to use. You know, I mean, sure, it's like a charge weapon. It's like a charge up weapon, but it's still really fun to use. Like seriously, I've been playing like Pixel Gun recently with this thing, and it's still a really and I just came to appreciate this weapon a lot. Moonblaze is also there, but it's a legendary weapon, and it's pretty hard to get. And it's also a charge weapon, which is really good. But it's a really good weapon to use. You know, it's actually really fun too. And then for the special weapons, the first weapon that I'm going to like recommend and mention is what? Where is it? I think it was. Hold on. Is high voltage. This one is literally. It actually is literally one of the best special weapons to date. I don't know, but up to date. I don't know, but it has a really high DPS and it shoots really fast. But you know the drill at this point with really fast firing weapons. Shoots through ammo very quickly. Be cautious about that. Another weapon that you can try getting is where is it? Hold on. Ah, crap. Electromagnetic cannon. Yeah, I know this weapon is pretty bad, but it's really good for like 3-cat spamming. Another thing that I haven't really mentioned about 3-cat spamming is that it has no delay. Is that some weapons like electromagnetic cannon, for example, has no delay when you switch weapons. It's really important to know. Another weapon that I would recommend getting is, I don't know, is, oh, beam weapons. Laser weapons are actually really good. Laser weapons are pretty good in this game. I mean, they're not crazy good, but it is kind of fun to, like, annoy your opponents with, like, using lasers and stuff. Frostbeam spell is pretty okay, but I'm not really sure about its DPS. You know, Petal Pyro is basically a flamethrower, but I forgot that I actually have this. That I actually have this skin, but it's still a really good weapon to use. It's a flamethrower, it has armor regeneration, and it slows the target. I think it also has a pretty high DPS, you know? Oh, this one's really good. Assassin's Assistant. Um, it's a really good weapon. You can electric shock the enemy, which will basically stun them for a few minutes, and you can't even, like, do much about it because when hit, the enemy slows down and is able to move normally for a while. Like, I remember this weapon doing like a huge favor for me, and it did me, like, a very big service about it. Hold on, let me see if this is recorded. Okay, yeah, it is. All right. Sorry about that. I had to make sure that I was still recording. What else? This weapon is somewhat okay to backpack. But you can also, like, get this for, like, at least 500 coupons. It's not crazy good now, I don't think, but it's still a pretty fun weapon to have for the iconic appeal. I don't think iconic appeal actually matters too much, but you get the deal. Restructurer is a pretty good stream beam weapon. Hold on, let me make sure. Like, here's what stream beam weapons actually are. You have to charge up for a while, and then it's not that good. I'm not really and that's probably saying something that isn't really that good with, like, stream beam weapons. But there are, like, a bunch of stream beam weapons that actually, like, outclass this one. Secret PG Archives is also a really good weapon to use because it has teammates healing, and it also, like, restores teammates ammo, and it also has, like, a pretty good DPS. Like, you can literally surprise your opponents with this. Yeah, this is probably gonna be a little weird coming from me, but I think Paperhead Assistant is actually a really good weapon. It has a good DPS, and it also has Rage. I don't know if Rage is actually, like, this good, but the damage of this weapon increases with both every defeated enemy. The bonus resets after death. I don't know how to do the math, but okay. Alien Bouncer is also a good weapon for some reason. I don't know why it's mythical, but it's just good, okay? And then the final what? The final special weapon that I actually recommend getting is Engineer Exoskeleton. You can actually buy this for, like, 1,000 coupons, and I'd say it's worth it. I'd say it's really worth it because it has, like, a fast firing weapon, and it also has lifesteal, and it's also a laser. It's pretty cool. Now we're getting into the snipers. I'm not even sure. Ooh, Brutal Headhunter is a good one. It's also good for 3-cat, and I think it also has, like, a very good DPS a very good DPS. By the way, if you don't really know what the term DPS means, is I'm pretty sure it's short for damage per second. Yeah, I think it's damage per second, but it's still a really good weapon to use. For a sniper bow, I don't really know about that too much, but I kind of like, see myself using this weapon, like, a lot in my old account, but it's not that good, but it is silent, so which is pretty good. Prototype, oh man, Prototype is such a good weapon to use, especially in the past. Like, it's a really good sniper that anybody can ever buy. But the only downside of this is that it costs gems. 300 gems, which shouldn't be much of a problem based off of my experience, because I think when I actually had the ability to buy prototype, I saved up all my gems and then bought this weapon immediately, you know? But it's still a really good weapon to use, you know? And because of its, like, decent DPS, but there's one certain weapon that actually outclasses it, that being the anti-hero rifle. This one is literally like one of the best snipers of all time. Like, I just love it so much, and it's also a really good weapon to have. Hold on, someone's calling me. Sorry about that. Anyways, yeah. It has wall break, but it also has, like, a 2x zoom, and you can actually, like, input some, like, crazy damage, or I don't know. You can actually, like, do some crazy stuff with this weapon, like 3-cat, or spam, or, like, go on a killing spree with this weapon, like in matches, anything. Like, you can literally just do anything that you put your mind into. Oh yeah, another weapon that I also recommend getting for 1,000 coupons is anti-champion rifle. Like, this weapon is basically like anti-hero rifle, but on steroids. It's like literally good. It has like one of the highest DPS of all time. And if you know what you're doing, and if you actually get yourself like a headshot, it's like a one-shot headshot, I think. And then particle accelerator is okay. It's not a crazy good weapon, but it is pretty good. You can also buy it. You can also buy it from the gallery for like at least 500 coupons. Supercharged rifle, I think is okay, I guess, but it's nowhere near as good. But it's still a really fun weapon to have that you can also buy from the armory. And then Zero's rifle. I never use this weapon too much, but it's still a pretty fun weapon to have. I mean, it's kind of hard to get now, but I'd say it's worth it. It has blindness and it has acceleration after killing. Pasta sniper rifle. I kind of forgot that I actually had this weapon, but it's still a really good. But it's still really good. Oh yeah, not to mention that it also has, like, the first shot is critical, and it restores HP and armor while reloading. I used this for a pretty short time, and I kind of underestimated it, but it's still a pretty fun weapon to have. Dance rifle is also there. I don't know why, but I don't really know why I actually recommend this weapon, but I mean, it kind of gets outshined by it pretty much gets outshined by Party Sniper Rifle and some, like, other weapons that I'll mention later. Ooh, Railgun is there. But you can only get it for, I think you can only get this weapon for at least in the gallery for 500 coupons. But it has a really good DPS. Hypno Pursuer was a very good weapon. I don't know if it's still a very good weapon to use. I don't really know if this is still a very good weapon to use, but it has electric shock and visibility while reloading. While reloading, and it also has X-ray vision, which is pretty much like a demigod weapon, and it is pretty annoying if you basically know what you're doing. Sniper exoskeleton is also a really godlike weapon. I mean, it's just good. That's all I'm saying. And it also has, like, 10x zoom, and I think its DPS is probably, like, one of the highest. It's also, like, one of the best sniper weapons, and one of the best exoskeleton weapons to use of all time. And then one more sniper I'd recommend getting is revolver sniper rifle. You can actually buy this in the gallery for 1,000 coupons, but I'd say it's worth it. It has critical damage, and I think critical damage would actually, like, land, like, every hit, I would say. Well, land every other hit, but if you actually happen to get a critical hit, and if you happen to get, like, a critical hit and a headshot at the same time, done. Like, murked. So yeah. And then finally, for the final category, I would I would recommend for heavy weapons is Anti-Gravity Blaster. I think I think you can actually get this for a reasonable price, and also it's its DPS is also like okay for like beginner players. Apocalypse is also there. I think this weapon actually did like a pretty good amount of damage, but I don't know if this weapon is still relevant to this day. But I remember using this weapon a lot, but it's still pretty good. What else? Rocket crossbow has a pretty high fire rate, but it's not as good as you thought it would be, but it's still pretty fun to use. Rocket launcher is pretty. It's kind of basic, but it still does a good amount of damage. I don't know if it's actually going to be crazy good because I had never really maxed out this weapon. But for example, it's kind of like the weapon ultimatum, but it's kind of fast to reload, and you can do some crazy stuff with it, like rocket jump. Actually, don't do that because it basically has self damage, and also yeah, it also has zoom, and yeah, I think it's still a really good weapon to use, though it is kind of basic, you know. Fireball spell. I enjoyed using this. I think it's a pretty fun weapon to use, but it's not as good as I thought it would be. Wizard wand is a pretty good weapon to use, but it's not really as good as it's not really as good as Dark Mage Wand, which is basically used for 3-cat. But Wizard Wand is pretty much the closest thing I actually have. Circus Cannon is also good, but I think it's kind of in the same vein as Big Buddy, which actually does a lot of damage, but it also has a really slow fire rate. So I don't think but it's still worth it. But a weapon I sadly have to recommend, which I don't think is worth it, is Dragon Breath. It's a laser, but I don't really think it should. I don't really think it actually should be in the heavy category, but I think its DPS is really high, so I guess that's why. Ooh, we have our first instance of consecutive explosions. Spirit's Whisper is actually really good. Need I say any more? And then what else do I have? Another weapon, sadly, unfortunately, that I have to recommend is Deadly Beat. This weapon is really good for 3-cat, and it also has a pretty high DPS. I can't believe I said that. The reason why I didn't really want to recommend this weapon because I hate Deadly Beat so much. It sucks. Like I'd rather base cannon, but this one's unfortunately really inferior. Armageddon, you can actually get this at a pretty early level for a reasonable price. It's also really good for rocket jumping, and you can also buy some multiple skins for it. For it, I should say. Proton Freezer, even though it's pretty hard to get, but it's still a pretty good weapon to use. You can actually use it for rocket jumping and for high damage and stuff. So yeah. Don't attack me for this, but I kind of recommend Game Addiction. I kind of recommend any kind of homing missile weapon, but Game Addiction is pretty much the only homing missile weapon that I basically have. Now, homing missile weapons are hated by other people, but I think they're really cool. But just don't. And you can also be really annoying, and you can also spam with this weapon a lot, but I don't know if I would recommend it, but I personally like to use homing missile weapons. But okay. Ooh, this one's a really good one. Pixel Cola Refresher. This one is literally a very good weapon. It's literally one of the best heavy weapons of all time, and because it has super rocket jump, and not to mention that you can also buy it in the gallery for 1,000 coupons. And need I say any more? Another good rocket jump heavy weapon is Demolition Exoskeleton. Yeah, a lot of people say that this is only good for rocket jumping, which I highly disagree, because if it has rocket jump, then why does it have multiple shots? But its DPS is somewhat okay, but I don't know. Maybe this weapon got buffed or something. And finally, the final weapon that I would recommend is Destruction System. You can actually get this one for 1,000 coupons. And yeah, I'm gonna go more than just tell you. I think it's better to show you how good this one is. It does a lot of damage, and its burning damage is really good. Though the burning tick is kind of slow, but it is pretty good. I don't really recommend it for rocket jumping, because it literally does self-damage. And yeah, that's all the weapons. But I'm not done yet. Yeah, the weapons, there are some weapons that I don't really have, but are really good, like Harsh Punisher, Ultimatum, Dragoneer, what else? Terramorphing Stone, unfortunately. You can also get Touchdown Gauntlets. You can get a lot of more you can pretty much get a lot more weapons that you can actually try to put your mind into, but you have to work very hard. Well, not really work very hard, but you pretty much have to pray that you can actually get any of these weapons. For example, any of these weapons in the super chest. So yeah. And then for the wear, choose it. I'm gonna assume that you basically have an event armor, but I recommend sharpshooter armor because it increases armor movement speed and jump height. It's really good. I think you can only get this weapon for from a certain event or something, but it's still really good. But if you do not have the event, I recommend getting the golden armor. Oh yeah, you may notice that I actually have a skin, the champion skin and stuff. I kind of do that. And then for the hat, I recommend the Great Samurai hat because it basically just increases it increases movement speed, jump height, and increases melee damage. And then for the mask, I recommend this one, or you can also get the sniper mask, and it can also it has a chance to ignore headshot if you're holding a weapon from sniper category. I don't know how they actually said that. But you can actually ignore a headshot if you're using a sniper, if you're holding a sniper, if you're holding a sniper weapon, anything. But I recommend the Maniac mask, or more accurately, the Jason Voorhees mask. But it's because it increases melee damage. I have some more, but I'm not really sure if I would recommend any of these. The skins don't really matter. You can see here that I actually have a lot of skins, but I kind of recommend using custom skins. Just please be very reasonable and just make sure that that the skin is pretty appropriate. You can see here that I actually have 4 skins. I made Jolteon, Eevee with a Rebel helmet from Star Wars, myself, and the Flaming CC from Rayman Origins. I'm gonna leave it at that. And then for the cape, you can actually choose whatever cape you want, but based off of my experience, I recommend the sniper cape if you really want insane damage from a sniper. There's Ultimate Defense Cape, which increases weapons for damage for backup and primary. There's Sharpshooter, and there's also a Crystal Christmas Cape. I'm pretty sure you actually get the deal. And then for the boots, I know for sure that you need to... For sure that I highly recommend getting Crystal Christmas boots. Or any sort of, double jump weapon. Double jumping is pretty important in this game. Because you can actually make it to, some platforms that you can't really quite get to with only, using, a single jump. But I kind of recommend, Crystal Christmas boots. Or, some other, weapons and stuff, And then for the gadgets, I highly recommend this one. Nuclear grenade is like if it actually goes to the center and actually hits somebody directly, or if somebody's close to this thing exploding, it insta kills, and it also has radiation. So yeah. I also kind of recommend Phoenix Blood, although I don't really recommend it very much because it sounds annoying. The weapon, itself sounds annoying once you actually throw it, but it's kind of like a Molotov cocktail, but it's a little better, And then there's a bunch of tools that you can try using. There's a bunch of tools you can actually try using, but the one that I recommend is I don't know, literally anything. Clockwork Nutcracker is basically is kind of like Cyber Bees, but with only a single shot and with less damage. Cyber Bees, you have to get them in a clan, which I probably will not cover, but it's still a really good weapon to use. You can also use Jetpack, Barrier, Time Machine, Demon Stone, literally anything. You can also use Turret as well, if you're crazy enough. But yeah, you can literally use anything that you put your mind into. Misc doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't really it's just only good for cosmetics. Royal, it's also just cosmetics and stuff. There are some pets that I kind of recommend as I recommend this. I don't really know. I think it's a lucky cat because it has rockets and healing. But the one that I would most certainly recommend is either the Tank Mouse or the Mecha Kitten. It's a really good weapon to use. Oh yeah, and also Cheering Cookie. It also has damage boost for allies, And it also has a critical hit damage and stuff. So yeah, choose whatever pet you like. Just make sure it helps you a whole ton a lot, And yeah. I'm not really sure what else to say, but yeah. One more thing before I go. One more thing before I go is that you can also use a controller of any sort. Just make sure that your actually button binds are pretty much correct. You can literally just use any sort of controller, this Xbox controller, for example. You can use a PlayStation controller. You can use a Switch controller. Practically any. I would say practically any controller that you actually put your mind into. But for me, I use this some sort of adapter to connect my Wii Classic controller, which I had to change the controls a little bit to make it a little bit more playable. So yeah, just pick your poison with any controller with any controller that you put your mind into. Anyways, I hopefully that covers everything. One more thing that I really want to mention right now is the lottery. Lotteries are kind of weird. I'm not really sure about that. You can see here that I pretty much am getting kind of started to getting close to opening a super chest. Hopefully I can get Masterpiece Musket or Harsh Punisher. But yeah. What I would recommend, but you can open up a winner chest to make progress a lot faster. But the one that I recommend doing is getting fighter chests, because the process is kind of slow and it doesn't really get you too far, but it's kind of cheaper and you can also open these for only 50 keys. So yeah, that's all I'm gonna say. Anyways, thanks for watching. I hope this guide actually I hope this guide was actually somewhat helpful for you guys. And until then, this is Spark Habit. If you like this video, please give this video a big thumbs up. Subscribe if you're new around here. Turn on notifications bell so that you don't miss a single video I post. And tell me in the comment section below that you actually enjoyed this video. If you have any more questions, try asking me, and I'll try my best to answer them. Anyways, this is Sparkcab, and I'll catch you guys later, and good luck.